What is going on, everyone? Welcome inside a special edition of Bunt Take, sponsored by Batavia Downs. I'm going to do a 53-man roster projection today. I know it's been the hot topic with Bills rookie minicamp getting underway on Friday. A lot of people want to know who's going to make the team, who's going to get cut. Is there any surprises in between? Can't wait to break down the Bills roster position by position. I do have some surprise cuts in there, so this is going to be a fun time. So we're going to get started right away, and we're going to start with the quarterbacks. This is pretty easy when you're talking about the Bills quarterbacks. I have both Josh Allen, Mitch Trubisky making the roster. Obviously, that's not going to shock anybody. Shane Buechele will be the one cut to the room. Then the running back room. This is also fairly cut and dry when you talk about the Bills' 53-man roster. James Cook, the starting running back, obviously coming off a 1,000-plus yard rushing season. Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, Reggie Gilliam, they're safe. So you're going to have four guys there, the cuts being Darrington Evans and Frank Gore Jr. I do think Frank Gore Jr. has a chance to be on the practice squad. I'm excited to see what he does this summer. Kind of a bummer that there really isn't room for him to really make this team, but am excited to see what he does after a great college career at Southern Mississippi. Now, the wide receiver room is the one of the biggest debate right now. Depending on who you ask, there's a million different ways the Bills receiver room could play out going forward. I think there's four locks on this roster going forward as I see it right now. Obviously, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and I'm going to include Mac Hollins in that group as well. I know some Bills fans might not in that situation, but they brought Mac Hollins in to be a contributor. He's been a captain on previous teams he's been on. He's been very productive on special teams and also does have a bunch of skill at receiver. So I think when you're looking at this team, those are clearly the top four guys on this receiver room. Then there's a lot of debate after that. There's a lot of guys that have the capability of making this roster. So when you look at who's going to be fighting for these final spots, you're talking about guys like Chase Claypool, KJ Hamler, Justin Shorters, Tyrell Shavers, Andy Isabella, and Quintez Cephus. And I'm going to break down how I think it's going to play out in just a second. It all really depends on what you're looking for out of the receiver position. Now, the Bills are definitely going to need some special teams contributions from these guys. And are they looking for upside? Are they looking for just depth? I ended up having the roster at wide receiver play out with six guys total. I have Chase Claypool and KJ Hamler as the final two receivers in the room. I was back and forth. Quintez Cephus definitely has a shot. Andy Isabella, Shavers, Shorter. How are they going to play this out? I think they brought in Claypool because they want to give him one last opportunity to show that he is capable of being an NFL receiver. It's low risk, high reward. Is he even going to make the team? Who knows? But we're talking about a guy who, in his first 3 years of his career, averaged 56 receptions for over 725 yards, had 9 touchdowns as a rookie. And his attitude definitely hasn't been great. He's been traded twice. He's been let go by Pittsburgh. He's been let go by Chicago and did nothing in Miami last season. That said, Chase Claypool has an impressive skill set. When you combine his size and speed, he was a sub 4.45 at the combine coming out of college. With his size, there's only been one other player in the history of the NFL combine that had that mix of size and speed, and that was Calvin Johnson. So not saying that Chase Claypool is Calvin Johnson, but you're definitely working with a guy that does have some special traits. And if he can't get it right in Buffalo, he's not going to get it right anywhere. So I think last opportunity, they're going to get his best effort. And if it doesn't work, like I said, easy to move on from him. And then KJ Hamler, I think that's an interesting guy too, because you look at what he did coming out of Penn State. very fast. Now, he's said on record he can run a 4.27. I don't know if I believe that, but he has been clocked as a sub 4.40 in the past. He was a second-round pick. A lot of people forget the league was very high on KJ Hamler coming out of Penn State, had 30 receptions as a rookie. He's been dealing with a ton of injuries in recent years, which has really derailed once promising career, but still only 24, going to be 25 soon. Young player, gives you a vertical threat, big playmaker. But like I said, we haven't seen it the last 3 years due to a plethora of injuries. And then last year, not even on an active roster in the NFL. But I think the Bills brought him in because they want to see if there's anything still left in him that could show or at least contribute at the NFL level, and their special teams ability when you look at a guy like KJ Hamler. Now, my cuts, I think all four of these guys have the potential to make the team at the wide receiver position. Justin Shorter, his best case is that he was a draft pick just 1 year ago, a fifth-round pick. Do the Bills want to cut a guy that they invested a fifth-round pick in the 2023 NFL draft? I think he has to show something in camp. Last year, obviously, not the greatest start. Ended up missing a lot of time due to injury. Was never activated again at the end of the year. I think Justin Shorter has to show something. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Bills are going out and making all these moves for guys with experience. I think that tells you what they thought about the guys in their room. Tyrell Shavers, that's been the hot name lately for Bills fans. I thought he looked good last summer in the preseason and training camp. Obviously has a lot of special teams experience in college at San Diego State. A very talented gunner, has size. I'm intrigued. I think Shavers is a guy that has a realistic path towards making this team as one of the depth receivers / special teams contributors. I would be perfectly fine if he makes the roster. And then everybody in Bills Mafia, one of the favorites in Bills Mafia, Andy Isabella. I'm personally not as high on Andy Isabella as what a lot of Bills fans are. I understand it. He's speedy. He looks like some of the slot receivers that we've seen over the years in New England, but he has done nothing in the NFL during his time. He was once considered a decent prospect coming out of UMass, a second-round pick. Definitely has the speed, but it is not translated to anything. And the difference between him and a KJ Hamler is Isabella's had shots. He's been multiple organizations. It hasn't been injuries with him. He just can't see the field. So I know he was part of the team last year and that he spent most of the season on the practice squad, but he did not make appearances. Even when we were talking about a receiver room last year, that wasn't the greatest, and he couldn't really even see the field then. So I don't know what changes that going into this season. Maybe people look at it and they're like, well, the depth is even worse right now than what it was last year. Maybe we can open a spot and see what he can do. I guess it's definitely possible. He's not a guy that I would have high hopes for necessarily going into this year. Practice squad, fine. Anything more than that, I'm not really expecting much from Andy Isabella. I'm not saying he can't make the roster, just not one of my personal favorites going into this season. And then Quintez Cephus, obviously, we know he missed time last year due to the gambling situation. And I saw some people say, well, why would the Bills take a chance on a person that has issues like that? Well, you know what? He actually has some talent. He can play the receiver position well. He's not going to amaze you with what he does, but he's a quality, well-rounded player who has NFL experience, who could come in right away and provide decent depth, not high side, but he could provide decent depth. So, like I said, the receiver room, I'm going Coleman, Samuel, Shakir, Hollins, Claypool, KJ Hamler, but don't be surprised if any of those other four guys make it. I know a lot of fans weren't happy with the Chase Claypool signing because a lot of them wanted the Bills to double dip in the draft and get a vertical threat with what was perceived as a deep wide receiver draft, or they wanted them to get another deep threat. And when they hear Chase Claypool, they hear the attitude issues. They're like, damn, I didn't really want that. I wanted somebody that I could feel more comfortable going forward with. But like I said, I think the Bills see something in Chase Claypool, and I think they're hoping that one of Claypool, Shavers, Shorter stand out for being one of their bigger targets, and then get a speedier guy among the likes of either Isabella, Hamler, and the likes of those guys. Let's move forward to the offensive line. I have 9 linemen making it here, starting obviously with the big guys, Deion Dawkins at left tackle, Spencer Brown right tackle. I have David Edwards, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance. Those are who I project as the 5 starters at this moment in time. Ryan Van Denmark safely on the roster. Same with Alec Anderson, who impressed last summer and in the preseason. Cedric Van Pran Granger, he's the guy a lot of Bills Mafia is putting a lot of hopes on. A player out of Georgia that won 2 national championships. They're a finalist for the Remington Trophy, which goes to the nation's best center in college football. Some people think he has a chance to compete for the starter role at center this year. Unless they've been just pumping up Connor McGovern for no reason, I think Granger is going to be the backup center going into the season, but I do think he's a guy that will have a shot at starting at the center position in the future. And then my final offensive lineman on my 53-man roster projection is Lyall Collins. He's going to provide some depth if healthy, and I think that's what the Bills are hoping for. He's a guy that has had a lot of starter experience in the NFL, obviously injury concerns in the past, hoping that he can come in and at least contribute. My cuts for the offensive line, the notable ones are Grable, Tommy Doyle, Will Clapp, Richard Garage. Now, Grable, a 7th-round pick, very good athlete. A bit of a project, though. I don't think the Bills want a project making their 53-man roster. They're going to hope probably to put him on the practice squad, see if they can squeak him in there and develop him over this season, next season, if, like I said, no one else snatches him there. Tommy Doyle, great person, has obviously been with the Bills for multiple seasons. Just awful injury luck. And with all the guys in front of him, I don't really see a path for him to make it unless he just goes out and dominates this summer. Richard Garage, he was a popular guy in the offseason last year at UDFA out of Florida. Solid prospect. Don't see him making the team either. And then obviously Will Clapp, a veteran, could provide some depth. Not ruling any of these guys out. They just have longer paths to making the team. Now let's go to the defensive line. I have 10 linemen making it on the Bills' defensive line, starting with the DNs, guys like Von Miller, Greg Rousseau, AJ Epineza. Those 3 pretty much locks. Rousseau and Epineza, I would imagine, are your starters. Maybe Von, if he finds some rebirth or some life this offseason. Obviously, players a year plus after the ACL going into their second season back normally have increased production. But with Von, we're talking about not just coming off an ACL injury, but we're talking about a guy that is in his mid-30s. How is he going to look this year? Now, I do think he can be a 5+ sack guy if he gets some of that heals up from that injury where he feels a little bit back to normal. But I'm not going to bank on him being a massive contributor on this team. Obviously, I hope I'm wrong. But I do think Greg Rousseau and AJ Epineza are the 2 best defensive ends on the team right now. Continuing with the defensive line, Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, obviously those are pretty set in stone. Daquan was playing at a great level before his injury last year. Ed Oliver, best season of his career, showed that he does have double-digit sack potential being a defensive tackle. Then some new guys on this team. We're looking at Dwayne Carter out of Duke, their 3rd-round pick. Excited to see what he will do this season. Brandon Beane has already said he'll be a plug-and-play defensive lineman. Dwayne Smoot, a recent free agent addition for the Bills, someone that's had success with the Jacksonville Jaguars in the past. Will he be a contributor on this team? I think he makes it. I think he will have a shot at being productive. Obviously, he had an injury too. So we're hearing a common theme. There's a lot of these guys on the Bills that have dealt with injury issues in recent years. Bills also added Austin Johnson as D-line depth during the offseason. Javon Solomon, D-end out of Troy that they drafted in the 6th round, had 31.5 sacks over the past 3 years in the Sun Belt Conference. Excited to see what he can do going forward. A project guy. Wouldn't expect a ton from him right away, but someone that the Bills are hoping that they can mold into something decent down the line. And then the last guy on the Bills D-line I have rounding it up is Kingsley Jonathan. Obviously, he's been productive as a backup on the Bills. Not really much stats-wise, but a guy that the Bills liked. And when they lost him a few years ago, they found a way to bring him back into the organization. They obviously like what he brings to the table. My cuts, Casey Toohill, Cameron Klein, and Eli Anku. Toohill brought in this offseason, had production in Washington in the past, had 5 sacks last year. He might have a path to making this roster. He might be one of the final guys in this rotation. So I was kind of on the edge. Do I have him make it? Do I have him miss it? I don't believe he has a ton of upside, but he is a quality backup that has shown he can play at the NFL level and is deserving of getting minutes. So if he doesn't make the Bills, he's making some roster, in my opinion. Cameron Klein, obviously, Bills fans have liked him in the past. Eli Anku, another guy that Bills fans are familiar with, players that can provide depth if called upon, could go to the practice squad. So the D-line room, I'm not going to say it's a great D-line room, but I think it's a pretty good room. The depth is decent. They should be good overall going into the season. The linebacker room is where they added the most this offseason on their defense. We're talking about guys like Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano. We already know what they bring to the table. All pro capability with both of those guys. Matt Milano, unfortunately, coming off the injury. Some uncertainty about when he's going to return. Will he be back at the beginning of training camp, or is he going to miss some time? Brandon Beane actually addressed that recently. Said, we think he's going to be back by at least the middle of training camp. He could be back for the beginning of it. We don't think it's going to go into the season. They are being cautious with him, but they did say that they are confident that he will be back. Terrell Bernard sucked when he missed the playoffs, especially when they didn't have Bernard or Milano against the Chiefs. You had that feeling in your stomach where you're just like, that's awful news going up against a Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce offense. But that's how the breaks fall. Now the Bills brought in a lot more depth, bringing in Deion Jones, Nicholas Morrow, 2 guys with plenty of starting experience in the NFL. Worst case scenario, they provide quality depth. I have both of them making the roster. I have 6 linebackers total. I have Dorian Williams as the 5th linebacker, and then Edifwan Ulofoshio as the 6th linebacker. My cut, Balin Spector, and it's not even that I don't like Balin Spector. I think Balin Spector has quality skill set. I think in moments that he's been asked to play, he's stepped up. He's never going to be a great player in the NFL, but he's a solid person that you can plug in at times. But his durability has been an issue. The durability of the Bills linebackers as a whole has been an issue, and I believe that's why they have been so aggressive in trying to get depth for this room going forward. A lot of these guys are smaller linebackers, which I don't think is a bad thing. You need linebackers that are able to fly around, that can cover some of the speedier tight ends, running backs, and so forth. But it can be an injury risk at times as well. And I think we saw that last year in the playoffs. And now they're bringing in more quality players. So if there is injury concerns, you won't have as much of a drop-off with the next man up, or you don't need to call A.J. Klein right before he goes on a family vacation and say, hey, can you suit up in a playoff game for us? So linebacker room, I have the 6 guys. And then DBs, including corners and safeties, I have 10 making the roster. Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, that's a great starting cornerback duo, in my opinion. Rasul Douglas was incredible once he came to Buffalo last season. Christian Benford, still believe he's underrated across the NFL. Bills fans obviously appreciate him, know what he brings to the table. But as far as the rest of the league, I think he's still an unknown commodity. Taron Johnson, the nickel cornerback, AP All-Pro last year, 2nd team All-Pro, great player. Cole Bishop, I think he's going to end up being one of the starting safeties on this team next to Mike Edwards. And then Taylor Rapp, he's going to have a role regardless of if he's starting or not. Kyer Elam, hopefully he can take a step forward, even if it's in a backup role. We've seen when he hits the field, he can make plays. It's just consistency and getting his coaches to believe in him. The Bills haven't traded him, so they must still see something in Kyer. Hopefully they can bring that out in year 3. Cam Lewis was brought back to the team. He can provide depth at corner or safety. Jamarcus Ingram, the UB product, I believe he will make the squad. And then my final DB is Daquan Hardy, which means I have Damar Hamlin as a surprise cut on the Buffalo Bills. I like Damar Hamlin. I actually was one of the people that said early last year that I thought he would still be on the Bills and that there would be a path to him actually playing games and being on the roster. Now, he didn't play many games, but the Bills trusted him enough to be part of the roster last year. They were not concerned about putting him out there. He showed that he could handle NFL football and that he was mentally prepared to be back. The fact, though, that he did not see much playing time tells me that the Bills didn't have the faith that he is at the level that they need out of the safety position. They added Cole Bishop. Is there a path for Damar Hamlin to make this team? Absolutely. But when you look at Mike Edwards being brought in as a free agent, then Cole Bishop being drafted in the second round, that tells me the Bills were looking for a change. Rather than promoting Damar, they wanted other guys to take over for Poyer and Hyde, and still Taylor Rapp on the team too. So I'm going to go Hardy over Damar Hamlin as the final DB to make this roster. Hardy is exciting too. He could be some people believe he could be a good nickel cornerback in the future, a prospect that, even though a 7th round pick, does have some upside, and then special teams ability on top of that. And then the specialists, I didn't go anything crazy here. Sam Martin, I have returning as the Bills punter with Tyler Bass and Reed Ferguson rounding up the specialists. So there's really not a lot of crazy cuts in my projection. I would say the biggest ones would probably be Damar Hamlin, Balin Spector, Casey Toohill. Some people might disagree with me about Grable. Looking at the receivers, that's probably where I'm going to have the biggest debates with many people in the Bills fan base. I've seen a lot of people that have Chase Claypool, KJ Hamler cut, and guys like Shavers, Isabella, Shorter making it. Sure, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to really get up in arms. What the biggest takeaway I have from this roster at this point, and sure, a lot can change between now and the end of training camp and preseason. Injuries are going to happen. You can almost guarantee there's going to be some injuries to guys that you like that you don't want to see go down. But we're gonna see some injuries impact things, and then we're gonna see some of these guys on the field during training camp and the preseason that will stand out. Where at that point we're gonna be like, there's no way you can cut that player. So who are those guys gonna be? Are we gonna see the good version of Chase Claypool? Are we gonna see Chase Claypool struggling? Are we gonna see a guy like KJ Hamler make a name for himself in the offseason? Will he be the guy that looks good in shorts, that gets the fan base excited, like what Andy Isabella was last year? Or will we see Isabella shine once again in the summer? Will Justin Shorter take the leap? In the running back room, will Frank Gore Jr. show us something that did, like Darrington Evans did in the past? In the offensive line room, will Grable show that he is deserving of making the roster? Will Tommy Doyle show that he still has the potential to be an NFL lineman? Will Casey Toohill show that he's deserving of making this roster? Going forward, Balin Spector going up against Edifon Ulofoshio versus guys like Dorian Williams is going to make it, but who will win those linebacker battles? There's a lot of quality competition, but right now I don't see a lot of crazy uncertainty with this roster. We'll see how it plays out. But thanks to everybody that has tuned in to this quick video about my Bills way too early. And I have to say that with a lot of emphasis, way too early Bills 53-man roster projection, because right now going into rookie minicamp, it doesn't mean a thing what I say. We will find out so much more in the next couple months. But thanks for everyone tuning in. We're going to be back with Pay the Bills podcast next week, either Wednesday, Thursday, breaking down the Bills schedule, talking about the marquee games, which ones we're looking forward to the most. Probably have our first way too early record projection as well. So stay tuned to Trainwreck Sports next week for our Bills schedule breakdown. But appreciate everyone for tuning in for this special edition of the Bunt Takes podcast. today, sponsored by Batavia Downs, and look forward to talking more Bills football throughout the off season.